guys, welcome back to Ashire Books. Today's going to be my May wrap-up part 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the books because I've read quite a few this month. So let's see the books. So the first book that I finished for the second half of the month was Never Snoozed by Maya Banks. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I already talked about this one and one of the other ones in my historical romance recommendations video part 2. So if you're interested in that, definitely just look at that video. But this one was really great. This is also the book for the Romantics at Heart book club for this month. I believe their live show is going to be this coming Tuesday, which is June 5th, I believe it's June 5th. So if you're interested in hearing more about it, definitely check out their live show. They always do a fantastic job. But this was great. So this is, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It basically follows Graham, which one is he? Graham Montgomery and Evelyn Armstrong. So basically they're from two kind of like rivalry clans, and it's kind of decreed from the king that they need to marry to kind of make a peace between their two clans. Evelyn had an accident when she was young, and her kind of clan sees her as like touched. Basically, she doesn't speak, and people don't really know what's wrong with her, but she's never been the same since this accident. It was fantastic. I loved Graham. I loved how he really saw past any of her kind of, I don't want to call them problems, but her inabilities, and there was so much more to her background. It wasn't surface level. It was so much deeper than kind of just, you know, a head injury. It was just really interesting to see how that developed. I don't want to give it away because I really think it's really interesting to kind of dive in and look at the story without knowing too much, but just know I loved this. I thought it was fantastic. It was a great historical romance. I liked it a lot. The second one I read, I also talked about in my historical romance recommendations video, and that was A Duke in the Night by Kelly Bowen. So this is my first book by Kelly Bowen. I really enjoyed this. To me, this really was reminiscent of like a Tessa Dare, but a bit more serious. And that's not to say Tessa Dare isn't serious, but I've only read a few of her books, and they tend to be a little bit more lighthearted than this one. But this one follows, is it August? Yeah, August Faulkner, who is a duke, but he's definitely like a self-made duke. He came from nothing, had a really tough beginning, and really made a businessman of himself, and he's very wealthy, but he doesn't take kind of that for granted. And then it's Clara Hayward, who was always kind of the debutante, not debutante, she was like the belle of the ball. She was very beautiful, very kind of ambitious, but she never got married because she's very educated, and she wants women to be educated, and at this time that was kind of frowned upon. So she is not married, but she's the headmistress of a school, and she loves what she does. She firmly believes in like educating women, which I just loved that part of her character. It's definitely a very like feminist-centric historical romance, which I absolutely loved. I loved that, you know, to me, yes, maybe all women weren't like this back in the 1800s, but there were definitely women out there who were fighting for, you know, women's rights back then as well. And I loved it. Basically, it starts because August buys the school that Clara is the headmistress, or her family kind of owns. So it goes from there. I highly recommend this if you want something different for historicals, and just kind of looks at social issues as well as like a romance. The third book I read was Murphy's Law by Rhys Bowen. This is a historical mystery. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know if I said I gave The Duke in the Night 4 out of 5 too, but this one was great. And I think I mentioned I was trying to get into some mysteries, and I thought historical mysteries might be the ticket because I love historical settings. I loved this. This was set in New York at the turn of the century, so like 1900. I thought that was the best setting. I just loved it. It was very atmospheric. So our story starts with our character named Molly Murphy, and she is an Irish immigrant who's coming over to the States because something happened in Ireland that she needs to escape. And basically that's where this book starts, and then Molly gets over here, and I will say the first part of this book is a little bit slow because it kind of is setting up the whole story for these characters, you know, coming through Ellis Island and all of that. This does not shy away from talking about, again, like more of the social issues of the time, the, you know, just the horrible things that some of the immigrants a lot of them come over to the States and have to kind of go through when they get to Ellis Island. It was not all like sunshine and rainbows. And basically that's where the story starts, and Molly is just the spunky, feisty woman who really wants to make something of herself. And she kind of just throughout the book, this one sets up up kind of what her storyline's going to be. This is a long series. I think it has like 10 books in it or something like that. And each one kind of focuses on a different mystery. So this one starts that. There's also a main character named Daniel Sullivan, and he is one of the captains of the NYPD, and it was just really, really good. This one I gave 4 out of 5 just because it was a little slow, but it was great. So I also read The Death of Reilly, which is book 2 in the Molly Murphy series, and I gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I don't have the book because I actually listened to it on audio, but it was fantastic. I highly suggest this series if you want something interesting that's like a historical mystery that has a very atmospheric setting and really feels like you are in New York in 1900, but also focuses on those kind of mystery aspects. There is also a small romance that's like very, very small at this point, but I can see where it might go between Molly and another character in the book. But The Death of Reilly, basically Molly really wants to become a private investigator, and she decides that one of the PIs that she's run into, Patty, is the person that she wants to kind of teach all her ways. He's really resistant. He's like, no, you're a woman, like you can't be a private investigator. She doesn't really take no for an answer, and it kind of goes from there. I just felt like this one was much more fast-paced, and you get introduced to a lot more characters in this one. I loved it. I can't wait to read the rest of the series. The next book I read was Highlander Most Wanted, which is the second book in the Montgomery Armstrong series that I just read the first one from, and I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I just feel like Maya Banks can't do wrong for me with any kind of like Highlander romance. This one I can't say too much about because it kind of, even though a bit of a standalone, it definitely builds off of what happened in the first book, so I don't want to ruin that for anyone. But basically, one of the brothers from the first book is the main character, and when they, at the end of the first book, they went and kind of had a rescue mission at this castle, and one of the women who kind of helped them is the main female character, and her name is Genevieve McGinnis, and I love this. This one was so emotionally, like, heavy, but I loved every second of it. And a lot of the kind of theme of this book is like trust. Can Genevieve trust, what is his name? Bowen. And can Bowen trust Genevieve because she kind of comes to them in very interesting circumstances, and he doesn't know whose side she's on, and she has been through so much in her past, and it's just, I loved it. It was so good. Definitely pick this up. The next book I read was The Wild Heir by Karina Hale. I never know how to say that, but I loved this. This is book 2. I don't know what the series is called, but the first book was The Swedish Prince, and I loved this one even more. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. You know how I love a royalty romance, and this one follows Prince Magnus of, oh gosh, was it Norway or Denmark? I honestly can't remember what country he was from, but it was great. He's kind of the wild prince, the wild heir. Circumstances happen and he needs to get married, and basically his parents give him this list of princesses that he can choose from, and he picks one, and the woman that he picks is not your typical princess, and she comes from kind of very sheltered background. Her father basically put her in boarding school from a very young age, and she really just doesn't know very much about, honestly, the royal life, and she's always just kind of been very quiet, not quiet, but she's been very sheltered. She doesn't know much about kind of that world, but she has her own passions and her own beliefs, and I really loved this. I loved the characters. That's what really drove it for me. For a new royalty romance, definitely look no further. This was really, really good, and I highly recommend. The next book I read was How the Duke Was Won by Lenora Bell. This is The Disgraceful Dukes book 1. I did already read book 3, but I kind of accidentally read them out of order, which was okay. And I loved this. I gave it 4 out of 5. I'm loving Lenora Bell's storytelling and her characters and her writing. This one to me is kind of like historical romance, The Bachelor. Basically our main male character, James, is kind of called this, he's like a scandalously uncivilized duke, and basically he is told that he needs to get married, but he's been abroad for a very long time. He has like a cocoa factory and he wants to work. He doesn't want to be a duke, but someone dies, his brother dies, and he has to become one. So basically they bring in all of these females for him to kind of choose from because he is very resistant to this idea. And our female character is Charlene Beckett, and she is actually the illegitimate daughter of a duke and a courtesan. So basically her stepmother, who she's never had anything to do with, comes to her and says, I need you to play your sister because she's not here, but I want her to marry a duke. So it's kind of one of those, like, he doesn't know who she really is. She's pretending to be someone else. You know, what's going to happen? But it was so fun. I just feel like this was a fun book, but it also had really emotional kind of ties to it as well, because Charlene obviously had a lot of things to go through and she was definitely protecting her family. That's why she took this, and I just really recommend Lenora Bell in general, and this series is great. I love how they're very different characters. They're very original characters, and I thought that was great. I read what's called First Comes Love by Emily Goodwin. I did want to mention too, The Wild Air and this one are both on Kindle Unlimited. I try to mention that if they are, and they were both. So I give this one 4 out of 5. It's my first book by Emily Goodwin, and it won't be my last. I picked this up because she had a new release coming out, and I kind of wanted to pick something else, and I'd had this on my TBR a while. So basically this is a brother dating my brother's best friend storyline. So our main character is the bad boy, and she knew him as a teenager, had a bit of a crush. Years later, they've stayed away from each other, and something may or may not happen, and then something may or may not cause them have to kind of figure out what they want out of a relationship, or do they want a relationship. I'm trying to be vague here, but I liked it. It was very cute. It wasn't the most original thing, but I really enjoyed her character, especially the main character, Lauren. She felt really fleshed out. I loved the little kind of nuances she gave her character, like she loved Disney and she liked books, and I felt like she was a very real person. Also, there is a scene towards the beginning of this book where she's on a date from like an online dating site, like a Match.com. And I just felt like, A, it was hilarious, and also I'm like, yes, I completely understand, because we've all been on a bad date before. So I loved it. It made a very endearing character. And then our bad boy Noah obviously goes through a lot in this book as well. They both kind of are forced to grow up really quickly, and I liked it. I thought it was really cute, and I'll definitely be picking up something else from Emily Goodwin. And the last book I read this month was The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. I just actually hauled this in my last haul, but I already read it because I just couldn't help myself. So this is a fantasy romance, I'd say, and I'd say it's definitely an adult fantasy romance. It was a little bit more on the higher fantasy side than I was expecting. It's a dense story, and there is a lot going on and a lot of storylines to follow, but I enjoyed it. I listened to most of this on audiobook, and I think that really helped because it kind of slowed me down and had me kind of really listening to what was happening, if that makes any sense. I like this a lot. Basically, we have our king who's Winter of like the Winter Kingdom, and then we've got our main female character who is Kamzin from Summerlee. Basically, there's been a war, and Winter won, and he has come to kind of claim a bride. Kamzin is the daughter of the king, but she is hated by him for reasons which are awful, and he's an awful human being. But they trick him into taking her because he doesn't want to give away one of his other daughters as his bride. There's so much going on in this. I don't know how to kind of summarize it, but this book is just so great. If you like fantasy and you like romance, just go read it. Like, that's all I can say. Basically, Kamzin goes back to the kingdom, and obviously it takes a lot of trust to kind of trust her. You know, they kind of build their relationship. There's just a lot going on in this story, but I absolutely loved it. It was a dense book. I will say there are some steamy scenes, so if that's something that bothers you, maybe don't pick this up, but if you are okay with that, I would definitely recommend to anyone who likes fantasy or romance. It is a little heavy, but I think it was still completely worthwhile, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I cannot wait to read the next one. So those are all the books I read this month in May. Definitely let me know if you've read any of them or your thoughts on them. I just love talking with you guys in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!